The American flag. It means different things to different individuals, but it's undeniably a symbol for the United States. It conjures emotions both good and bad, happy and sad. Here's my own tribute to Old Glory through woodworking. So let's head into the shop together with liberty and justice for all. "13 stripes, 7 red, 6 white, arranged in an alternating pattern starting and ending with a red stripe. 50 white stars on a field of blue, arranged in 9 rows of 9 by 6, with every other row of stars offset." Seems simple enough. If you haven't looked at an American flag lately, let me tell you, it has a lot of specific dimensions. In order to gauge my dimensions for this American flag cutting board, I Googled a dimension calculator, which is what you see here. In this online dimension calculator, you can view and set all of the various dimensions like width, length, star gaps, etc. But I'm specifically concerned with the last dimension, which is the stripe width, which is represented by the letter H here. I'm most concerned with this dimension because I'm limited by the thickness of my stock, which is 0.75 or 3/4 of an inch. When I input this one value, all of the other values change in accordance. You'll likely be limited by one of the dimensions in the calculator due to other reasons, like tool capabilities or even customer specifications. Simply enter the most limiting value for your project in order to get the dimensions for the other values. And note, even though I get specific dimensions for all the other values, I don't strictly stick to them. For this project, I'm using Purple Heart for the field of blue or Union, Maple for the white stripes, and Paduke for the red stripes. I'm going to start with the Union part of the flag by jointing the pieces of Purple Heart so that I get a nice tight glue up. As this is going to be an end-grain cutting board, I'm going to create panels out of each of the 3 types of wood. For the Union, this will consist of the 4 pieces of Purple Heart, which after joining are just under 2 inches wide. To ensure the panel doesn't buckle during glue up, I'll use a couple of pieces of scrap wood as cauls on both sides. I place one of the cauls down first and cover it with parchment paper so that the panel doesn't stick. Then I'll arrange my pieces of stock and glue them up, removing any excess glue. Next, I'll lightly clamp the panel, then add another piece of parchment paper and the other caul. Using some deep C-clamps, I'll apply light pressure on the cauls and then add more pressure to the bar clamps. After drying overnight, the clamps and cauls are removed. I now set out to repeat the panel process on the other two types of wood. For a more consistent feel and uniformity, I'm going to cut down the padauk from 4-inch wide strips to 2-inch wide strips. Now that I've got all the padauk cut to width, I'll arrange the end grain in alternating directions, which will give this cutting board some additional character. Using the same process as before, I'm ready to glue up the padauk panel with cawls, parchment paper, and C-clamps. And again, after drying overnight, the clamps and cawls are removed. Now we're on to the maple panel. I had originally started using the jointer on these maple strips, but was getting some pretty bad chipping. To remedy this, I set the fence on my table saw so that I'm removing just a minimal amount of material to get nice squared edges. Then it's just a rinse and repeat process on the panel glue up. After removing the clamps and cawls the next day, I now have all three of my panels ready for a run through the drum sander. Here you can see that all three panels are flush with each other, which will play a critical part in the assembly later. With all the panels sanded to thickness, I'm now going to concentrate specifically on the blue field or union part of the flag. First, I'm going to take the panel and cut it into 1-inch strips, which will then be turned on edge and glued into an end grain panel. For dimension purposes, I only need 7 strips, as my end dimension of the union will be about 7 inches by 5 inches. I might even have enough of this panel left over to complete another cutting board. Before gluing the Purple Heart strips, I'll take a piece of 100 grit sandpaper to remove any burrs on the edges. And as I did with the padauk, I'm going to create the same alternating grain patterns by rotating every other strip. During the glue up, I want to pay specific attention to the center line of the individual pieces and use that as a reference line. About an hour after clamping up these pieces, I'll come back to remove any of the dried glue squeeze out. The following day, I'll remove this new end grain panel. Then it's over to the drum sander for a few passes. Here's where I get to show you one of the newer tools in the shop, a desktop CNC machine. I'm going to use it to carve the stars into the Purple Heart panel, but as you can see here, I'm using a scrap walnut panel as a test run to make sure that things are carving to the dimensions and depth that I'm wanting. Once I'm happy with the test run, then I'll put the Purple Heart panel in place and run the same CNC router sequence on it. If you have specific questions about the CNC machine, the software, and the file that I'm using, please ask below in the comments. I'm really trying to see if doing a video on them specifically would be worthwhile. From the measurements, you can see that the dimensions of the Purple Heart panel are 5 inches by 7.5 inches, but a little of that length will get cut off later. Once the piece is securely clamped to the bed of the CNC machine, I open the arranged star pattern file, and then send the sequence to it via a USB cable from my laptop. The G-code file is received by the CNC machine, which tells the router spindle to raise and spin, move to the appropriate beginning position, and then lower by varying increments while carving out each individual star. Then, repeating that process until the field of stars has been completed. As the CNC machine is finishing its job, I can remove the panel. For this cutting board, I'm going to pour a white shimmering epoxy in these newly created star reservoirs. If you would like to see that process and the rest of this American flag cutting board come together, please join me in part 2. But before you do, please give this video a like and subscribe to my YouTube channel if you haven't previously. Also, please share this video with anyone who might enjoy it. As always, thanks for watching.